Hey guys, welcome to another Trade Genius podcast. Philip here with Bob Kula as always, and we got a very important video today. We got to talk about this rail strike, and if we don't get a resolution on this real soon, most of our economy is going to come to a grinding halt. So let's get into this video and figure out what's going on.
Trade Genius.
So Bob, can you tell us what's going on with this?
You mean the rail strike that President Biden averted last
yeah, the once averted rail strike.
Yeah, this is the rail strike with 9 lives. So the in this country the railroad infrastructure and workers they have a bit of a they have an absolute monopoly on freight traffic, right? And freight traffic is basically 1/3 of the economy will shut down without freight movement. And of course, we would all starve, and we would all have issues with clean drinking water. And it's ironic that President Biden brought up that very subject today, and basically people are like saying, "What? Water and railroad? What does that have to do?" They move the chemicals. Mm-hmm. Okay, most industrial chemicals move by rail, not by truck. And some move by pipeline, but most of it moves by rail. Mm-hmm. And you won't have the chemicals that are needed, the chlorines and things of that nature to be used in the water treatment facility. So right. All that would shut down.
Right.
And that's hence the reason why we put in our teaser, get water now, but we're only half kidding. And, it brings up a bigger point, Phil, is that, our country's losing resilience. And what I mean by that is that you shut down any of these certain pressure points, people last hours and days versus weeks and months. And this is one of those. There's no, it's a central union. It's a central strike. It's not like, one railroad union is going to go out on strike and the other ones can operate. It's a national calamity, and the same thing happens with, remember when the pipeline got shut down by that hack? It shut down like 40% of the oil movement, refined products in the country. Right. And then the Mississippi River dried up and it killed barge traffic for 70% of the country. And then if the port workers go out on strike, it kills shipping. So we're in a situation now where, and I'm very sympathetic to workers getting paid. Well, I think they've been underpaid for last, 30 years, and I think people are pressed to disagree with that. Right. And but at the same time, is the companies, the unions that have leverage are going to take advantage. And I think this is one of those situations where a really weird situation's happening. They negotiated the contract, which I think the unions thought were pretty fair, but I think there was a few, just like any negotiation, you always want to hold out for one more, right? But there's one more that they're holding out for might actually break it, and that's this 7 days of sick leave. And I guess the issue is they must get really good vacation time off. And I think, adding on 7 more days of sick leave, and you know how sick leave works today in the age of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. Is that, I think I have COVID. Mm-hmm. Here, I tested positive. Right. I got to be home for 7 days, right? Right. When, who knows, the COVID tests were very unreliable, and there's no chain of custody on it, right? Mm-hmm. You can self-attest. And I think it's becoming an issue. And so when they had the House voted to actually impose the contract on the union. I don't know about you, but if I was in a union and Congress wanted to impose a contract on me, I'd be probably pretty pissed. And if that goes through, well, who knows that the railroad guys, remember, there's 2 ways you work in this world, Phil, right? You work by the written rule, right? Or you work by the spirit of the rule, correct?
Yeah.
And you always want people to work by the spirit of the rule by saying, I know this is the written word, but I'll do a little bit extra here because it helps everything. But when you get people in a situation saying, okay, you impose this on me, I don't know if you know what that really means. My dad was a UAW guy for a while. And what it means is that those guys would literally could grind a plant to a halt by just following the rules to a T. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what can happen here with the railroad strike, that it gets imposed on them. But that's not really the issue here while we're talking today. Is that the Senate needs to also agree to this, and then President Biden will impose the contract on these guys. So the situation here is that if passed the House under obviously a Democratic Congress pretty easily for imposing the contract, but it barely passed the House on giving them 7 days of sick leave. Okay, and now that the balance of power has changed, Biden's panicking because if he can't get it through this Congress and the railroad workers decide not to continue to negotiate but walk out, we're not talking a 1 day strike's not a 1 day strike, Phil. You and I were talking about before. Starting next week, they're going to actually start doing a wind down process. Well,
Friday.
When you wind down, you wind up, right?
Right.
And so people start making extra, considerations like, hey, I better line up some trucks, right?
Right.
Or I better pump some stuff out and then turn my workforce down. And the Senate has come out and they need 10 Republican senators to agree with this and every Democrat to agree with it. They probably had the Democrats on board, but there's like 4 senators, Republican senators said, hold your horses here. We're not in favor of the 7-day sick day rule. Some guys are not in favor of imposing a contract on the railroad workers. They would prefer that they would continue negotiating in good faith while they're still operating.
Right.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Right.
And I think you were telling me, maybe you could jump in. You said, what day do they start that wind down process?
I saw the article today that I think Biden was, because you and I were talking that Biden all of a sudden has been chirping and hitting the headlines, right, about the strike and getting this thing averted. And that not even before, when it was pretty much the same issue, we didn't hear a whole lot. And then he came out and said, we told him to here's the deal, and they're going to go ahead with the deal that we proposed. Then this week, like multiple times a day, we're seeing Twitter headlines from the White House about, hey, you guys need to, the House needs to pass this bill and the Senate needs to pass this bill. So like the urgency is like cranked way up. And I think they're super worried. And then what we saw today was that starting Friday, so there's different classes of rail service. Starting Friday, the first of those classes have to, by protocol, start winding down. So that means like Amtrak starts canceling paid tickets and routes and things of that nature, because December 9th is the do or die date. So I think why he's freaking out about it is because if he can get the Senate to pass it like today or tomorrow, then that averts that wind down. And that happened actually back in September, if I recall correctly. Amtrak actually did shut down for a couple of days, and then they finally came in at the last minute and said, oh, here's the deal, we're averting it, but they're rejecting exactly what they were trying to propose, right? And so now the House is trying to force that original deal into being with the additional 7 days. And so, like you said, the Senate, Senate doesn't look like it's a slam dunk. So this is like a significant issue, because if the Senate doesn't pass it, well, basically tomorrow or by Friday, right, we start the doomsday scenario as far as the rail goes. And if you guys don't comprehend the rail in this country, that is literally the cardiovascular system of our economy. I mean, everything goes on rail, from 40-foot containers to automobiles to I've seen airplane fuselages, everything, chemicals, you name it, food. You think COVID supply chain was bad? This is going to be 10 times worse.
Yeah, I mean, it shuts the ports down too.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think. I don't know. We'll see how the Republicans react to this. But, remember, Biden said this was a done deal.
Right.
Now they're trying to impose additional conditions on it that are more union favorable, but not favorable to, businesses. And Biden thinks he's thinking he's going to, he's going to get a freebie out of this. Hey, force the issue. They're going to shut everything down. We're going to do this. But I don't know, if I was a Republican senator, I'm going to say, look, President Biden has the executive authority to force the railroad workers to work. You don't need Congress. He could just declare a national emergency and force them to work, and in good faith. Because we want to push everything back to Biden, right? He's trying to have his cake and eat it too here. Hey, Congress supported this. You know what I mean? And not me. And it was bipartisan and at the same time, but they got everything they wanted on the left. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. But look, guys, the name of the game, guys, for the next probably 5 or 6 years is going to be resilience. You got to make sure that you can thrive and survive over a 2 to 3 week period. Okay, if you had to operate out of your own house or your own apartment, I'm dead serious. If you don't do that, you're running the risk of big problems. And if you live in a city and these things happen, I'll pray for you. because those folks will rob you blind, and they don't even need an excuse anymore, and
Hey,
so you're just going to be easy pickings.
so
So stay tuned. We'll talk more about this next week. We'll see what they do. They may try to hold this thing over the weekend, apply a little pressure. I know that the Democratic left is freaking out. They're pissed off because they think they could slip this thing in because it wasn't in the original agreement. So just when they're all crowing about stock market blowing up sky high here and Powell may pause, this is going to be the year of the black swan. So they're just going to keep flying at us until one of them drops a turd on us.
Bob, really quickly, for the viewers, and I had asked you this question earlier, but could you explain to them, like, okay, you have unions, right? And obviously the whole point of unions was that they had power, but at the end of the day, right, like you said, the president could just evoke executive order, right, to just so what if they don't want to go to work? Like, what can you explain, like, technically what would happen if these guys were like, nah, we're not going back to work, we want our agreement? Like, what
Yeah,
happens
so
technically
I
in that
mean,
scenario?
what technically and legally can happen is that if Biden presents an executive order considering a national emergency,
Hmm.
is that those workers would be forced to go into the job. Those that do not go on the job would be considered in contempt of federal law,
Okay.
and a federal contempt charge, okay, is no joke. So you could be imprisoned, and depending on how adversarial the federal government wants to get with the employees. And so first of all the managers that can operate trains would be operating trains. They would impose that on it, just like the air traffic controllers. Remember, President Reagan, he fired them all. Okay, yeah, and then he replaced them. And then, basically, that would be the same thing here, is that we might be in a situation where the railroads are cut down by 60, 70%, and then they would go back and rehire people. You're not talking guys that are making minimum wage here in these railroad jobs. Okay, these are super high paying jobs. Now they're not easy jobs, but I know people personally that have been trying to get a railroad job for the last 10 years. Okay, they can't get the hours because seniority rules. All right, they got in the union, but they can't get to work. So it's not like they have a gun to people's heads. They could simply say, hey, whoever wants to come to work, come to work. If you don't show up to work, you're in contempt. That's how it would work. So now, will it come to that? I don't know. I think the railroad workers probably have a little bit more power than like the ports. The ports could be basically automated away.
Mm.
So they always have to be really careful. You could pretty much robotize the entire ports of entry, but the railroads would be a little bit harder. But we're getting to the point now where AI and automation can run those trains too. That guy is in there for a case of an emergency. Okay, that guy's not sitting there driving around with a steering wheel. He's pressing the button every 7 seconds to make sure he's awake, and for him to apply the emergency brakes if he needs to. That's the engineer's job now. Those trains pretty much run themselves.
All right, so wrapping this up, what do you think we or the viewers should do? Let's just say nothing comes out of the Senate tomorrow or Friday, and that first class of rail service starts to wind down. What do you think would be the prudent thing to do? You think we should go out and get some extra toilet paper, or what?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, it would be well, what I would personally do is this weekend I would go to Costco. I would get the three amigos of the paper products, right? Napkins, TP, and paper towels. I would go and I would probably get, if you figure, we drink smart water, get one of those a day per person in your household. So maybe get 4 or 5 cases of water. You'll drink it. It won't go bad on you.
Right.
And then, if you have freezer space, if you don't have freezer space, just go ahead and buy a bunch of the styrofoam freezers. And, I would buy some, make sure you have some, frozen meat on hand, and then get the canned foods of your choice,
Yeah.
and that way you're not stuck. And, people in the house, they don't realize this. This because you're in a home building, is that, I think I have an 80-gallon tank out in my garage. I could drink that water. Okay. And so, you could drink the water out of your tank. And that's the areas you just got to worry about. You think about it. Just go through your survival checklist, right? Water, food, shelter, clothes, okay, and then the ability to communicate with people. That's all you need. Okay, it might not be
Yeah.
fun, but you can get through with that. And make sure you have cash, because who knows how haywire this stuff will go.
Yeah. True.
But
True. True.
I think personally, Phil, it'll get resolved. But I think the Republicans will try to make a point. I think they're going to probably shove that 7-day rule up the Democrats' rear end, and then they'll impose the work order onto the unions, and that way the Republicans are clear on it, and then the Democrats got to own it, and then if they strike on that, then the whole problem's on Biden's hands. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Gotcha. All right. So basically, plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would anyway. So what if you have a couple things stacked in there? Christmas is coming anyway. You'll eat through that stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Trade Genius podcast. If anything changes on the rail front, we'll let you guys know with an update. Otherwise, look forward to our next one tomorrow. We appreciate the views. Let us know what you think on the rail strike and what you guys are going to do to prepare if it does wind down starting on Friday. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Trade Genius.